Good evening, class. Any doubts from the previous class? Any doubts from the previous class? Industrialization, agriculture, sab khatam. We have left with the last topic, that is planning. Okay, there was a question on premature deindustrialization last time. What exactly is premature deindustrialization? See, in a normal economy, for industry, your employment share, and this is GDP or the income per capita. So this is how it moves. It will increase, it will reach the maximum and then continue decreasing. For India, what happened was this happened very soon. Employment share, at a very less employment share, it started falling. And it happened also at a lesser GDP per capita. This is premature deindustrialization. As we grow, industrialization, there is more and more employment coming from industrialization as we move from industry to manufacturing, agriculture to industry to services. This is how it moves. Employment share increases, then decreases because your labor cost increases. China में यही कम हो रहा है. Employment share of manufacturing will fall because of increasing labor cost. This happened in India. A lot of economists believe that this is premature deindustrialization which has happened in case of India, that we're decreasing at a very lesser employment share and also at a lesser GDP per capita. This is premature deindustrialization. Any doubts apart from this? We'll start planning. See, most of the things you already know because you have covered industries and agriculture. Here we'll start with what is the requirement of planning. इसमें the different topics which we'll be covering. The history of planning. Then we'll talk about rationale of planning, planning commission, its functions, the features of different 5-year plans. First we'll cover the 7 5-year plans. This is before 1991. Then the LPG reforms. The evaluation of planning. Basically, we'll also talk about planning commission ka evaluation. And the last thing is your Niti Aayog, its role, functions, and also its working evaluation. This is broadly what we are going to cover. See, analysis part of the first, the LPG reforms, evaluation of planning, and Niti Aayog role, functions, evaluation. This is for your mains, important for your mains. They can also ask this rationale of planning in India in mains. Rest features they can always ask in prelims. They have already asked, I think, LPG reforms, where every year there is a question. This is mentioned in the syllabus. evaluation of planning, they've already asked the comparison of planning commission and Niti Aayog. Mains में already ये questions आ चुके हैं. Comparing planning commission and Niti Aayog, LPG reforms every year. There is a question. Planning commission के functions is important to know. Then only you can compare the two. Planning rationale. Why exactly did we start planning? Yes, slow dictate करवाएंगे यार आज. Okay, so let's start history of planning. Modern Indian history तो हो गया क्लास में. What is the history of planning in India? History of planning in India. In fact, one of the plans was in news recently. Planning Commission came in 1950. Before that, 1947 से पहले, did we have any talk of economic planning or plans? When? 1930s में क्या था? Was the president. 1938, the National Planning Committee. This is your precursor to your planning commission. It produced a lot of content on how economic planning should be done. This was under the... Both were related. Yes, Subhash Chandra Bose and Jawaharlal Nehru both were related to this planning committee, National Planning Committee. It produced voluminous reports on what exactly should the plan be. Under Nehru, yes. Chairmanship was under Nehru. In the prelims, I think this is a question for that also. National Planning Committee. Then also there was a Bombay Plan. Industrialists in 1940s. Then on the ideas of Gandhi, there was a plan formed called the Gandhian Plan. And M.N. Roy, communist, father of communism, he came out with a People's Plan. Very rudimentary ideas of planning before independence. None of these plans ever got the chance to be implemented because there was no implementation mechanism, as in there was no government in their control. So they never had the chance to implement these plans. But yes, planning was being talked about before independence. See, some of the important features of both this National Planning Committee and Bombay Plan. These two are slightly important. Features of this could be asked as part of history or economics. National Planning Committee and Bombay Plan both talked about dominant role of the state in economic growth and development. See, Bombay Plan, a lot of time is confused that Bombay Plan was brought out by the industrialists, a group of industrialists led by J.R.D. Tata, Purushottam Das Tandon and all that. A group of 12-13 industrialists had brought this Bombay Plan. They were not against the state intervention. A lot of time there is a common misconception that Bombay Plan was brought out by industrialists, so they advocated capitalist ideology. They in fact said that state should hold key industries and private will produce few consumer goods. But major industry would be in the hand of the state only. So this is a misconception that industrialists, they talked about less intervention of the state. They always talked about state having key role in economic growth, control over the major industries. Private will only be involved in few consumer goods. They talked about doubling the GDP per capita in 15 years. इसने 10 year बोला था, इसने 15 years. And both regarded agriculture important for the Indian economy. The important thing to here for both the things to know here is that state was regarded as an important component. Own and control the major industries. Both this NPC also talked about this, state owning, controlling major industries. This was before independence. See, Gandhian plan was very simple. Gandhian plan was to focus on small cottage industries, talking about rural enterprises. People's plan, again, very dominant role of the state. So major efforts before 1947, video lagging, buffering. Major phenomena before 1947 was that state has to have a key role in growth and development, will have a key control over major industries. Private will have a role, but the role would be very less. Even the the Bombay plan talked about this. Very few consumer industries. You can note down. National Planning Committee set up under, this is history of planning. Give the heading history of planning. National Planning Committee set up under the chairmanship of Jawaharlal Nehru. The National Planning Committee set up under the chairmanship of Jawaharlal Nehru in 1938. The NPC, set up under chairmanship of Jawaharlal Nehru in 1938, considered all aspects of planning and produced a series of studies, considered all aspects of planning and produced a series of studies on different subjects concerned with economic development. The major recommendations of the committee were first, state should own or control all key industries and services. The state should own or control all key industries and services. Second, agriculture is crucial. Agriculture is crucial to draw up a scheme of national planning. First is, state should own or control all key industries and services. Second, agriculture is crucial to draw up a scheme of national planning. Third, planning should aim at agriculture is crucial to draw up a scheme of national planning. Third, the planning should aim at doubling the standard of living of people in 10 years. The planning should aim at doubling the standard of living of people in 10 years. Then in the next paragraph, 8 leading industrialists of India conceived a plan of economic development popularly known as Bombay Plan. Conceived a plan of economic development popularly known as Bombay Plan. The plan aimed to triple India's GDP in 15 years. The plan aimed at tripling India's GDP in 15 years. It argued for a mixed economy model where the government would take control of basic industries and private sector would take charge of consumer goods. Private would take charge of consumer goods. They argued that nationalization of basic industries could reduce income inequalities. A Gandhian plan. Next paragraph. A Gandhian plan incorporating the policies of Mahatma Gandhi was prepared by Sriman Narayan and Acharya S.N. Agarwal in 1944. Gandhian plan was not done by Gandhi himself. गांधी जी की बातों से इन्होंने बनाया था. The Gandhian plan incorporating the Gandhian policies was prepared by Sriman Narayan and Acharya S.N. Agarwal in 1944. And in the next line, M.N. Roy formulated a plan generally referred to as People's Plan. It gave priority to agriculture. And nationalization of all production means. (1945) में बनाया था ये M.N. plan, M.N. Roy. 1945. Year 1944 for Gandhian plan, 1944 for Bombay plan, and 1938 में National Planning Committee was organized. Both Subhash Chandra Bose and Nehru were there. People's Plan is 1945. Now, what exactly was the state of Indian economy at 1947? This will give you a good picture of why did we need planning. The state of Indian economy at 1947. Already we have done most of the things. Agriculture industry, we've already written down the state of economy. What was it? Highly impoverished. No big industries. Okay, first we'll talk about agriculture. What were the features of agriculture at 47? Low productivity, food shortages. Anything else? Primitive technology. Anything else? High imports. How? Acha, food grains, that started after, but state of agriculture in general, low productivity, food shortages, primitive technology, subsistence agriculture. See, this is just a nationalization of all production. Poor agricultural equipment, land issues, yes. Land inequality. Subsistence agriculture, primitive technology, low productivity, food shortages. Anything else in agriculture? No surplus. Everything was being taken out from the agriculture. There was very poor investments. British had taken out all the surplus from agriculture, very poor investments. Land fragmentation, irrigation lack, yes, land issues. Low income to the farmers, subsistence agriculture, just the food grains. Anything else? No surplus, poor investments, lack of markets, yes, but that is again low productivity, food shortage, subsistence surplus nahi hai. Okay, what was the state of industry? You can also mention illiterate farmers. That we'll talk about the social profile also. What was the literacy rate of India in 1950s? High class. Oh, is this an answer? 16%. Again, I'll give you the figures. 16% literacy only. Industry. What was the state of industry? Unskilled labor. Before that, basic. Only heavy industry was there. In सारी industry पढ़ के you know the 47 for only heavy industry. Only consumer. No capital goods. Unawareness 16%. हाँ यहाँ से भी काफी लोग 15%, 16%. Other things. No capital goods. Yes, this is the most important. Deindustrialization, because we were importer of final goods and exporter of raw material. Anything else? Small and light industry, yes. Cash crops were more than food grains, yes. This you can say. Food shortages, dominance of cash crops, lack of capital. No capital goods, lack of capital you can say. Anything else? No government policy, no. Deindustrialization है ये government policy था उस time पे. Lack of infrastructure. Anything else? Skill literacy, this is dependent on imports. More handicraft, no labor laws. 48% no. Lack of infrastructure. Other apart from this. कुछ ही जगह पे industries थी. Also industry, one of the things we had written was your concentrated ownership, skewed size. Concentration of ownership, lack of regional balanced growth, only few industrialized states, coastal states, Gujarat, Tamil Nadu, Maharashtra. Closed economy, yes, you can say, but features of industry, what were the features? Closed economy, yes, a total overall feature. In fact, closed economy 47 के बाद ज़्यादा होगा. British economy so was dealing with a lot with the world, but taking out the resources, taking out the surplus from India was major problem. Anything else? एक important point is missing here. No exports, raw material. The thing is we were losing out this. सबसे बड़ा रीजन दोनों में है, टेक्नोलॉजिकल बैकवर्डनेस. See, if you remember, we discussed in industry that after Second World War, there was development of certain industry in India. Iron, steel, cement, chemicals. But they were not including new technology. They were overstretching the capacity of the present ones. Productive capacity उनकी भी नहीं बढ़ रही थी after Second World War. They were just stretching on the capacity of the present ones. Overstretching of the industry. Both iron, steel, cement, all the industries. Plus there was a lot of concentration of ownerships. Only few industries were large industries, rest were very small, not adding too much to the output. Mostly there were concentration of ownership. There was technological backwardness both in agriculture and in no specific land for poor farmers, so that is land. Technology in industries, yes, no skilled workforce, lack of technology, no heavy industry, no agglomeration or... So most of you have got it right. So you can note down few points at independence, Indian economy at independence. First, at the time of Indian independence, lack of profit as cost of production is high. Yes, that is technological backwardness. The Indian economy was overwhelmingly rural in character. See, these points you already know. If you have missed out, you can just draw this. Market was not done. Overwhelmingly rural in character, with nearly 85% of population living in villages. And driving their livelihood from agricultural. 85% of population living in villages. Driving their livelihood from agricultural and related pursuits using traditional low productivity techniques. Overwhelmingly rural in character, with nearly 85% of the population living in villages and driving their livelihood from agricultural and related pursuits using traditional low productivity techniques. Second, the backwardness of the economy. The backwardness of the economy is reflected in its unbalanced occupational structure. Slow, okay. The backwardness of the Indian economy gets reflected in its unbalanced occupational structure. 75% of population engaged in agriculture. Backwardness gets reflected in its unbalanced occupational structure, with 75% of working population engaged in agriculture. 75% of working population engaged in agriculture, 10% engaged in industry, and 16% in services. Next, 75% in agriculture, 10% industry, 16% or 15%, abhi 100 hoga, 15% in services. It was actually 74 point something, so 15% in services. Third, even with large proportion of population engaged in agriculture, even with large proportion of population engaged in agriculture, the country was not self-sufficient in food and raw materials. Even with large proportion of population engaged in agriculture, the country was not sufficient in food and raw materials. Next, there was almost complete absence of basic key and heavy industry. So basic is your chemicals, metallurgy, the raw material industry, refining, mineral extraction, key industry is your physical infrastructure, that is your roads, communication, electricity, railway, ports. Heavy, you already know engineering and machine making. The capital good industry. These all were absent. जो थोड़ा बहुत था हमारे पास, we were only having consumer good industry. Next, dominance of informal and unorganized sectors. Dominance of informal and unorganized sectors with respect to employment generation. Dominance of informal and unorganized sectors with respect to employment generation. What is unorganized and organized? ये एक जगह पे नोट ही कर लो, it will help you elsewhere also. What is the difference between formal and organized, or organized, unorganized, formal, informal? Okay, let's talk about first formal and unorganized and organized. Most of your employment was in informal and unorganized sector. This is true today also. These terms are used interchangeably, but they're slightly different. There is a technical difference. Organized, employing more than 10 people if electricity is used. More than 20 if not used. You will classify organized only when you have more than 20 people will be organized. There is no electricity used. Then more than 20 people is organized sector. If electricity is used, more than 10 people is organized sector. This is the Industrial Disputes Act 1948 say this is the definition. Industrial Disputes Act 1948. No fixed time to work, no social security. These are implications, but how do you define? This is how you define. Unorganized इसका उल्टा हो जाएगा. Less than 10 is organized. Less than 20 if used. The opposite in unorganized. There's no hard difference. More than 10 if electricity is used. Less than 10 if electricity is used. It becomes unorganized. Now what is formal and informal? Labor contract. See, contract, you don't say labor contract. No fixed term for organized and opposite fixed time term. These are implications of being in these sectors. Unorganized sector, less than 10, less than 20. There are no proper terms of contract. You can be removed anywhere. There is no social security. Iske implications हैं. This is not how they are defined. These are implications of being in unorganized sector. But what exactly is organized and unorganized? This is the definition. What is the difference between formal and informal? ये तो आसान है. Permanent service is defined under. So those becomes formal enterprises. So example, government services, they are defined under what contract? Civil services. Okay, let's for one time leave civil services. Amazon is formal, informal. Any private industry for matter is formal, informal. How? Everyone will have register. Condition of services will be mentioned in some act. Okay, then there's another debate. Let's talk about something more which is traditional. See, formal enterprises would be where they are registered with the government. Registered with the government under EPFO or ESIC. They are unregistered. The government should know your presence. Then only it can employ any social security measure. Formal enterprises are those which are registered. Informal are unregistered. So you can have organized informal. This is a technical difference. Yes, most of you, what if you are saying online that no job security, working period, this is all true. These are implications of living under this. Formal laws define hierarchy of office. What formal laws? Every company is not driven by one. It is registered under the Social Security Act. It is a formal enterprise. Informal are unregistered. The government doesn't know informal. How are they going to employ any registration or any provision? Yes, registration is the main point. They are registered, they are unregistered. So you can have organized informal. More people there but not registered. How many points have we written? 1, 2, 3, 5. Next is illiteracy was as high as 84%. The ad hoc workers who are not getting are informal. See, when informal, you are in informal or unorganized, if that depends on your service conditions. Informal में तो ad hoc workers ही होंगे because they are not coming under any compliance. And most of our MSMEs also are in unorganized informal. They're not registered anywhere. That is why they're not able to get the benefits and they're stuck in the low equilibrium. If you remember, we discussed that small firms cater to low quality, low technology products. So they'll always be there because they're not registered, not getting the benefits. The moment they get registered, digitalization, formalization happens, they'll get the benefits. They are, yes, PF benefits. This is what EPFO and IPIC. Where we count casual labor. Casual labor can be anywhere. Casual labor can be anywhere. Government employs casual labor. Government PSUs employ casual labor. Casual labor can be anywhere. That is not the definition of this. How you define unorganized and how you define informal and formal. Okay, next is illiteracy was as high as 84%. Majority of children more than 60%. In the age group 6 to 11 did not attend school. Illiteracy was as high as 84%. Majority of children bracket 60%. In the age group 6 to 11 did not attend school. Majority of children 60%. If government don't know about informal sector, then how government calculates data about informal workers? ये पढ़ क्या हो? कैसे करती है? GDP estimation you have done. You know, you've talked about how informal sector is estimated. How? How? On the basis of estimation, they just estimate. Yes, they extrapolate on the basis of the performance of few industries, they extrapolate into the whole informal sector. This is the problem, we cannot account for it. Registration is be made easier. The point is informal is you can never count. You start a lathe machine here, you start an industry, you're not counted. That's informal. A lot of self-owned enterprises are not accounted for because they don't own anything. Now, mostly what we say benefits of GST is they have to buy this registration now because they will not be able to get input tax credit from the previous cycle. The raw material mein they are paying tax. They will not be able to get if they don't have a GST number. So MSMEs have to get registered now. So this is digitalization and formalization is happening due to GST because it is bringing all these unregistered firms here because they will have to maintain their books now. If they don't, how will they claim input tax credit on their raw material? One of the biggest benefits of GST is formalization of industry. It's bringing all the unregistered firms now. बट उसमें एक और प्रॉब्लम है, अंडर इनवॉइसिंग ओवर इनवॉइसिंग हो जाती है. ओके, सो लास्ट पॉइंट इज मास कम्युनिकेबल डिजीजेस वर रैम्पेंट. मास communicable diseases were rampant, and in the absence of a good public health system, MCA database, ये MCA database में आ गए तो रजिस्टर्ड ही हो गए. MCA database में नाम आ गया तो that means they are registered. Mass communicable diseases were rampant, and in the absence of a good public health system, mortality rates were as high as 27 per thousand. Mortality rates were as high as 27 per thousand. IMR, infant mortality rate at 400 per thousand. E-Shram portal, yes, E-Shram and all these are register कराएंगे तब तो. These are just government is giving them mechanisms to register. से बहुत है, E-Shram है, उद्योग आधार भी है for MSME registration. Poor health indicators, you've written mortality rate as high as 27 per thousand and IMR, infant mortality rate as 400 per thousand. As high as 27 per thousand mortality and IMR at 400 per thousand. 16% was the literacy rate. What was the literacy rate for females? 1-2%. 7%. Now, this was what we had inherited. This is the condition at 1947. Now, planning involves state intervention. ये कितना hint let me give you. Planning definitely involves state intervention. Now, what model would you choose for development? Negative literacy कैसे हो सकती है? How can the literacy rate be negative? How can you unlearn? Okay. So this is planning is state intervention. Now, what are the different models available? What are the features? यहीं से निकल आएगा rational of planning. Now we are discussing rational of planning. Why did we do planning? What is the basic feature of? अच्छा मजाक था. Smiley लगा देते यार उसके आगे. What are the features of the? What are the basic feature of capitalist model? हाँ? Demand before that. Market से बहुत पहले. Yes, the prices are determined by state, by market. उससे बहुत पहले. Before that, profit oriented. Before that, see market आ गया, profit orientation आ गया, state है, free market yes. Before that, the basic of capitalism. Political science भी पढ़ लिया होगा अब तक काफी लोगों ने optional. It's one of the most populous optional. ऐसा हो नहीं सकता political science नहीं लिया हो किसी ने. Anthropology and political science, unbeatable. What is your optional? Geography. Public administration बताओ भाई. Planning पूरा एक planning and PSU is one of the topics in PubAd paper 2. अभी नहीं पढ़ी. Public administration, private player, private ownership. The basic is सबसे पहले own collective property. This is I'm talking about the socialist model, complete socialism. Mixed और ये Fabian और ये different varieties नहीं है. Socialism as Marx had imagined. Sociology भी है. Sociology वालों को भी पता होना चाहिए. Established markets, yes. Private ownership and motive. Main is private property. Class conflict. Okay, the feature is private property, no private property. Here is the presence of market. Price is determined by market. Profit making, yes. Also one of the features is inheritance is allowed. आधी दुनिया ऐसी गरीब हो जाएगी, इनहेरिटेंस बंद कर दो. Here it is market, it is price determination by the state. Now, why did we? IMR was 145 in 1947. You can check the IMR number once. My IMR number even I'll confirm once. मेरे को भी 400 ज़्यादा ही लग रहा है. So in this context, what did we choose? Why did we choose? Planning is state intervention. Now why did we choose planning? Better channelization. Why do you think market will not better channelize resources? Market is the most efficient form of allocation of resources. How do you know? Yes, one you could still say if you have very less players. Less players will lead to concentration of resources. So one point you can definitely say why planning, or you could say mixed economy, where state planning was being done. High investments, yes, very good. कुछ link कर रहे हो from the previous classes. One, definitely we wanted to prevent concentration of resources. यार IMR का एक बार नंबर चेक करना 47 में. तो मैं अभी एक बार कल चेक करके I'll update on this. ये पेन भी और prevent concentration of resources. Industry में we know very few players were there. Income inequality we wanted to control DPSP. Prevent concentration, prevent inequality. 39 articles. See, optimal use of resources. Optimal use of resources, market is the best use. Abhi aapne, you've seen planning, you've seen industry. How PSUs led to failures. To provide more focus. See, when market is providing you the best means of allocation of resources, why do you think in social welfare usse nahi hoga? Market profit bhi legi. Yes, now talk about failures of market. Market, according to economy, capitalist, free market economist, is the best to distribute and allocate resources, but there are instances of market failure. Before that, kuch aur basic, one thing you were saying, low level of savings. So you won't have no investments towards technology. So technological investments, technology लाने के लिए किसी भी process में you won't have investments because you have very low level of savings. That no technology. So for technology you need capital intensity. You need capital for that. For capital formation you need savings. You cannot have until unless you save there will be no investments. And this is I'm specifically talking about a closed economy. You can get investments in the form from outside. Your savings investment gaps can be filled from investments from outside. In circular model mein you would have read about this savings investment and leakages coming from outside. Price control, low capital to avoid monopoly. Yes. Now avoid monopoly is one of the market failures. What are the different forms of market failures? Low standard of living. Yes, low standard of living, we wanted growth. This is true. Low savings, low standard of living. Subsistence use of bad experience during past free time. Yes, this is also one of the reasons. Everywhere in the world the ideology was against free market because of market failure only. Now what are the different forms of market failure? ये अलग-अलग points में हम लिखेंगे. What are the different forms of market failure? IMR was 145. Yes, it's confirmed 145 only. Market will not focus on health and education. Yes, you're talking about this. These are all areas of market failure. IMR is 145. Please correct it is not 400. Market will not focus on health, education, sanitation. Very good. Again, why? Because it's a perfect case of market failure. Now, what are the different instances where market fails? Yes, fear due to history. That this was definitely a reason we wanted self-sufficiency. We did not want to depend on outside. So state control was important there. Before that, market failures. What are the different instances? One is definitely preventing monopoly. One or two players capturing the market and they are charging any price. They are controlling the supply. Monopoly, or what we call as market control. This is one of the instances of market failure where only one or two players remain and there is a monopoly formed. They can charge any prices. When we've already got so much data on how poor the economy was at 1947, could we afford a monopoly in any of the services? Another point is, if there is monopoly in say certain luxurious services providing to only 10% of the people, then we'll have only few goods being produced, catering to only few percentage of the population. Other forms of market failure. Market do not provide service in backward areas. Private work on profits. Cartelization, yes, cartelization is monopoly. Another point of market failure is externalities. कुछ थोड़ी बहुत इकोनॉमी पढ़ी होगी तो यू public good, yes, that is another market failure. Before that, what is externality? Okay, one type of externality is, see, understand right now, I'll make you write all these things. One is negative, one is positive. This is, your market fails in case of external. Focus on basic goods, lack of advertisements, lack of competition, focus, no. Lack of competition, not able to compete in global market. No, that's not the case. What is a positive externality? Negative, you said, yes. See, externality is something which you cannot charge the price for in transaction. For example, if you are taking a 10 rupee cigarette, it is harming your health. Is the harm on your health accounted for in the price of the cigarette? That is a negative externality. Example is your pollution. A company is producing certain good and is doing a lot of pollution. Does it undertake the cost of pollution in deciding the price of its product? Now, what is a positive externality? Education is a positive externality. It has benefits more than what is priced in the transaction. Education has more benefits at what cost you are getting. So these externalities are never being accounted for in the market transactions. Externalities are one important case where negative externalities you have to control because these costs will not be undertaken. Cigarette की cost में कभी भी health के ऊपर क्या negative cost है, that is not included. You'll never include those negative externality costs. Similarly, positive externality costs will not be included. So the cost of externalities are not included. That is a perfect case of market failure, and that is why you need government intervention in both the fields. Government will have to impose a cost on negative externality and has to subsidize the positive externality. We want more positive externalities to happen because they have a multiplier effect. Education, if you are charging certain fees, the impact is so much more than what the fees is being charged. Similarly, negative, the fees will not charge the negative externality. Similarly, positive, these things cannot be charged. You cannot put value to them. This is a perfect case of market failure. And that is why you need state intervention. How in public good? What is a public good? Again, non-rival and non-excludable. These are the features of a public good. Non-rival, what do you understand by non-rival? No, free rider is non-excludable. What is the meaning of non-rival? Public good is a perfect case of market failure. How? Yes, like drought in, yes, externalities, no, droughts is different. Drought is your tragedy of commons. That I'll talk about that also. Yes. So when you are talking about non-rival, consumption by one does not reduce the quantity. Non-rival means consumption by one. So if one of the players consume it, it will not be reduced for the other. For example, national defense. It is non-rival. अगर आपको लॉ एंड ऑर्डर सिक्योरिटी मिल रही है तो दूसरे के लिए कम नहीं हो जाएगी. You all will be getting the same. It is non-rival. Non-excludable, you cannot exclude the other person. You can't exclude the person. These are features of public goods. Non-rival and non-excludable. For example, national defense. Demand exists but no exclusive payment. Yes, this is what is. Lack of willingness. Now this, what is the problem with public goods? Why can't market provide public goods? Yes. So public goods, private player or market will only come here when there is certain profit involved, self-interest involved. Markets run on the principle of self-interest. But when you have a non-rival, non-excludable good, that is public goods, take the examples, always remember defense as the example. If you consume defense, it will not reduce for the other person. You cannot remove the other person from getting the same good. Now this cannot be priced in a market, because when you are consumption of one does not reduce the quantity. When this has to happen, you will have to give it for free. To ensure non-rivality, you will have to give it for free. And you know market will never allocate goods for free. Now when you are non-excluding, you cannot exclude the other person. That means everybody will be included, means some will not pay. This is the free rider problem. कुछ लोग पैसे देंगे, कुछ नहीं देंगे, but it is a non-excludable service. That means some are riding for free. Some are getting defense for free. So again you will have to provide it for free. Both the things have a problem. Public good is non-rival, non-excludable. These are features of public good. And market cannot provide for public goods because they will have to provide it for free. Because of these two features, non-rival and non-excludable. Any other? Yes, some strategic sectors. One point, yes, this you can also talk about, that there is certain strategic sectors which you cannot leave to the market. Atomic energy, space, you cannot leave it to the market because they may not provide you the service, they may charge high, but this is important for maintaining the sovereignty and integrity of the nation. Yes, free rider problem non-excludable goods में होती है. Public goods में normally we have free rider problem because you cannot exclude, there is no rival. Any other thing? If you remember, public goods may we discussed one more thing. Natural monopolies. See, there are a lot of goods which give profit only at certain scale of production. Natural monopolies याद है, PSUs may be talked about. PSUs have prevented natural monopolies. Example in railways. Railways, metro, ये प्राइवेट क्यों नहीं हो सकती कभी? क्योंकि ये प्रॉफिट एक सर्टेन स्केल ऑफ प्रोडक्शन के बाद ही देती है. Their initial cost is very high. Their initial cost is in front of non-rivalry. It is consumption of one does not reduce the quantity for other. Non-rival is consumption for one does not reduce the quantity for other. Non-excludable is you cannot exclude the other person from consuming the service. आप दूसरे को रोक नहीं सकते from consuming the same service. Example, public park is non-excludable. कोई भी पार्क में जाके बैठ सकता है. आप ये थोड़ी बोलोगे मेरा घर है. That is a public good. Defense, you cannot stop anyone from taking the law and order issue. ये पुलिस मेरे को बचाएगी, आपको नहीं बचाएगी. So you cannot exclude. There are certain goods which profit only at a certain scale of production. Returns only happen at a certain scale of production. They will only happen when you have certain scale. What are the examples? We discussed natural. These are natural monopolies. Natural monopolies where initial cost is high, you have to run them at huge quantities, then only you get a profit. Initial cost of investment is very high. And this is where you won't have the market. It's a long-term profit structure, and long-term profit bhi bahut time baad aayega, and then also you will have to run the quantity in volumes. Scale of production you have to keep high. Then only you can get a return. And in these industries where there are long-term investments, the private sectors will not come. Power distribution, telecommunications, broadcasting, waterways, irrigation projects. These are all whose initial cost of setting is very high. A lot of these private will not come because initial cost is very high. After that, it becomes a natural monopoly. Only one players will do. And that is why we talked that PSU stopped these natural monopolies going to the private sector. But normally private sector will not come here because it has to ensure a scale of production, then only it will get a profit. Initial cost is very high. It runs in huge numbers. Telecommunications. You have irrigation. Dam बनाने बहुत पैसा लगता है. You have electricity. It's not that it is not possible. इसमें सब private है, it doesn't mean it is not possible. The point is you will have only one, two, and that is why we say it will become a natural monopoly. Because a lot of players cannot invest because profit comes after a very long scale. And consider the initial, consider this. Consider the low level of savings. जब basic technology के लिए नहीं है तो major infrastructure और these natural monopolies में invest करने के लिए कहाँ से पैसा आएगा? Renewable sources, yes, renewable sources you have to provide. And consider all this at 47. I've given you all the data and discussed the reasons, the condition of Indian economy at 47 so that you get a background. Monopoly prevent करनी है because you have concentration of resources, concentration of ownership, skewed industrial structure. So you have to prevent them from controlling the market and controlling the prices. You have to create positive externalities and ban the negative externalities. See, government cannot say completely ban these goods. अगर गवर्नमेंट ये बताने लगी तो वो गुड्स ही खत्म हो जाएंगे सारे. Alcohol, you will have so many goods. Alcohol, food, you cannot. The thing is, government can signal it is bad by taxing it. The government can signal that it is bad by saying you can have bigger advertisements on cigarette packets. The government can only signal. The government cannot come outrightly ban. फिर तो वो dictatorial government हो जाएगी, lack of choice. They can only signal them. That is why education is subsidized and these are overly taxed. Even coal, 400 rupees per ton is the tax imposed on coal. Why is that tax imposed? Because it creates pollution. That is, government can control negative externality by imposing a cost. If you have heard, एक fat tax भी लगाया था केरला ने on fatty food items. That's, yes, that is to control the negative externality because obesity is being good. Government can only signal. But you need government intervention in the positive and negative externalities. Public good, and also there is another point of market failure, that is your information asymmetry. Give me examples here. What do you understand by information asymmetry? Imperfect information. We want to save our industry from global competition, then otherwise our industry will that time will swipe out. That is true, and that is what we did. But the point is, why did we need state intervention? ये तो technology और वो protect करना outside competition से because we are nascent. But why state? It's more basic. Okay, what is information asymmetry? Be more basic. R&D डिपार्टमेंट के बाद फिर भी आपको ये पता चलेगा कि जूते की क्वालिटी अच्छी है कि नहीं. You can research about the product. You can know about the technology. But there are certain areas where you cannot know. What are those areas? Information asymmetry is huge. Their market cannot charge anything, or they could charge anything because they know the benefit of that. It's very basic. किस सेक्टर में सबसे ज्यादा information asymmetry है? कौन से प्रोफेशन सबसे ज्यादा चार्ज करते हैं? Skilled professionals, yes. Who are those skilled professionals? Lawyers. Why do they charge so much? Because there's information asymmetry. They have the skill. Education, healthcare. Doctors know everything. Do you know आपको क्या बीमारी है? आप कितना Google पढ़ लो, you cannot compare. This information asymmetry happens in skilled professionals, skilled professions, law, education, healthcare. So you need intervention of the government here. Because they are perfect cases of market failures. Because the information asymmetry is too much. You cannot have the same amount of information to the consumer because they are skilled professionals. ये legal professionals, majorly it happens in professional services. Goods में कम होता है. Any party holding more information? Yes. Lack of one providing. CA, doctors, CA. CA भी बहुत ज़्यादा है. This happens in professional services. So professional service market, you need government intervention. See, this is the market failure is one of the major contention that why we need state normally also in economy. ये तो हमने अब यहाँ पर background हमारा वो है poor people and everything people don't understand, but otherwise also this debate of state versus market has these points of market failures. So we will always need state. जो एक capitalist dream है that we don't need state, abolish the state. That is the whole idea of public choice theories. NPM, वो यही कहते हैं. Ike, Chicago School. But these are the reasons why you need state. And now consider the background of India. Apart from that, planning, why planning? Certain political, ideological variation in skills, yes, because you can be overcharged. Any other reasons? What was the ideology? So why do you think Jawaharlal Nehru had such a big say? अकेले वही थे influenced. Then? See, this was during that time also, there were two things here, ideological reasons. One is overall in the world itself, against laissez-faire. What is this system? Least intervention. Ideologically, globally, there was movement against laissez-faire. Because even if you see 30s में, US had seen failures, Great Depression. And what did Keynes say? Keynes का सबसे पहले क्या एक ही solution था? No government interference. सबसे बड़ी उन्होंने बोलता कि खाली रोड भी खोद के गवर्नमेंट काम करवाए. गवर्नमेंट इंटरवेंशन वाज नेसेसरी बिकॉज मार्केट फेल्स. This is what was coming. So there was a complete movement, or you can say global backlash against laissez-faire, that you cannot, Foucault says, more knowledge, public choice. A lot of you are taking PubAd optional. बहुत confidence आ गया. So government intervention was required, so there was totally against. Public expenditure was required. Yes, this is what is said, so it was against laissez-faire. Also, ideological India में क्या था? India में ideological bend क्या था? Yes, Jawaharlal Nehru, frankly, I'm accepted that I'm socialist. Russia went out of depression. Intervention of state in recession maximum. Yes, so you are right that state intervention was talked about. There was a global mood against laissez-faire. जैसे आज against state है. हर जगह privatization, even national monetization plan. So there's a global mood against the intervention of state. So that time it was against laissez-faire. What was the mood in India? See, one point मैं पहले ही लिख देता हूँ. Everybody is writing. Socialist Russia escaped it. Socialist Russia was a success. Socialist USSR was a success. Lenin, Stalin were success. This was one of the major. Nehruji had gone there and he had studied their model. He was impressed. Socialist USSR was an influence. Also, India, most leaders were proponents of Fabian socialism. Not just Nehru, Ambedkar, B.K. Nehru, a lot of leaders, they were influenced Fabian socialism. इनका पूरा एक गढ़ था ब्रिटेन में in the London School of Economics. A lot of people learning there got first-hand experience of Fabian socialism. What is the difference between Marxism and Fabian socialism? Very basic difference. The state, Fabian socialism has state control. Any idea of socialism has state control. There is complete state intervention. They are not private. They allow private. See, major point of inspire from Lasky as his teacher. Very good. Lasky was one of the proponents of Fabian socialism. Lasky का बहुत influence था. Political scientists have entered the class. Lasky का बहुत बड़ा influence था and a lot of leaders. In fact, this was a joke during this first era के cabinet में Lasky के कोई ना कोई student तो है ही. The ghost of Lasky is always there in the cabinet. Because you had one or two students always there who were influenced by Lasky, and Lasky was one of the proponents of Fabian socialism. Extremity, violent overthrow and instant reform. Exactly, this is the point of difference. Taught in world history. Lasky you have read in world history. Fabian socialism does not talk about the overthrow of state. It is not a violent revolution which talks about overthrow. It says that we need democratic reform. The most prominent feature of Fabian socialism is democratic reform. Yes, it says state-led reform hoga, sab kuch state hi karega, legislations and all, but it will be a democratic reform. There will be no violent overthrow and instant reform of the state. Lasky was a very big influence. See, everyone, this is how your lead, a lot of your reforms will come from influence. That what your leaders are reading, what your leaders are influenced by. So Lasky had a very good influence on them. Even before this era of leaders, Fabian socialism started with who? जो दो सबसे पहले proponent थे Fabian socialism के इंडिया में. Regulated in Fabian, yes, you are always, most of you are right. पढ़ी लिया अपने तो you know it. Before this Fabian socialism, who were the earlier proponents of Fabian socialism? There's just one woman who was excellent intellectual depth. First women president of Indian National Congress. First women. History के number नहीं आ रहे. This is such an easy question. First women president of Indian National Congress. Annie Besant. Annie Besant and Dadabhai Naoroji were the first two parts of socialism. Annie Besant dropped this and joined Theosophical Society. But Fabian socialist सबसे पहले Annie Besant और Dadabhai Naoroji थे. Even Ambedkar was influenced by Lasky and so Fabian socialism. Sarojini Naidu, one of you, most of you have given the right answer, Annie Besant. And this UPSC is asked. This is a previous year question. 2016 they asked who was the first woman. Sarojini Naidu diya tha and it was wrong, I think. She was the first Indian woman president. Yes, but Annie Besant was earlier related to Fabian socialism. So you see the context: backward agriculture, backward industry. You had poor, illiterate people. So this is why you required planning. You required state intervention. Concentrated goals coming from the state. This is the reason why we were in favor of state-led reforms and not capitalism. Mixed economy tha, but it was mostly by the state. Another feature, I'll just give you the feature here, we'll discuss it further, was that this planning exercise was indicative planning. Planning in India was indicative planning and not direct, and not directive planning. Planning in India, see, we'll discuss this in detail. Just to give you an example, mixed economy कैसे थी? Right. काफी अच्छे से modern world history पढ़ा है. Impressed. Indicative planning and not directive. Indicative planning is you are influencing through policies. Directive planning is you are making them do it. This is the difference. If you set a target, you will provide the resource, you will make them do it. Indicative planning is when you can just indicate, when you can influence through policies, through your fiscal policy, monetary policy, through your distribution of resources, you can indicate, but you cannot enforce the target strictly. Now this will tell you the difference why India followed indicative planning, because we had a mixed economy. Most of your agriculture was what? If you remember, cooperative farming, may we discuss this. हमारे पास दो ऑप्शन थे एग्रीकल्चर में, इधर कलेक्टिव एग्रीकल्चर, कोलकोज टाइप फार्म्स, और वी कुड हैव पीस एंड प्रोप्राइटरशिप, दैट इज individual ownership of lands. So when you have indicative planning, you can only indicate the private sector. You cannot enforce the rules for them. You cannot make them do it. That is why it was planning activity in India was indicative and not directive. Agriculture का example, agriculture was all private. If you would have set goals for agriculture that this much growth you could have, could the state enforce anything on private land? For having directive planning, you should have complete control of the state. Complete control. For example, some form of directive, it was not directive planning, but we used tools of directive planning in industry. जब हमने सब कुछ उनका कंट्रोल कर लिया लाइसेंसेस से, that was how you enforce getting the targets. But even then, we were mostly indicative planning. We were not enforcing any targets from the industry. Planning in India was indicative planning. पवाड में 2 बार क्वेश्चन आ चुके हैं indicative planning का. 2020 also they asked 10 marker on indicative planning. 2018 also they asked on indicative planning. Yes, directive planning is enforcing with resources. Indicative planning is influencing through targets, influencing through policies. It's more of influential. And you also relate. Indicative planning will only work in mixed economy because you cannot force the private player to do anything. Directive mein you can force. Directive mein you need complete state control. They will enforce everything. They will enforce the target is followed. They will give you the resources. They will also have all the mechanisms to control. Any doubts here? Any doubts? The importance to understand rationale of planning, then only you will understand Niti Aayog, and then only you will understand failure of Niti Aayog. In fact, combined with features of planning commission, then okay, you will understand that why Niti Aayog is a very big failure. You are a PubAd interested person. I'm not PubAd interested, I'm PubAd infested. Interest कुछ नहीं है PubAd में यार. PubAd has ruined my UPSC life. Okay, so you can write down these things now. After independence, India made a choice of planned economic development. Planned economic development in a mixed economic system. Planned economic development in a mixed economy system. Then you can write rationale of planning. Rationale of planning first. The basic constraint on development. The basic constraint on development was the acute deficiency of capital. The basic constraint on development was acute deficiency of capital, which prevented the introduction of productive technologies. Prevented the introduction of productive technologies. In the same point itself, the reasons for lack of capital were the low rate of savings in the economy. low rate of savings in the economy. Second, the dominance of subsistence economic system, dominance of subsistence agriculture. Dominance of subsistence agriculture meant that there was lack of knowledge of market and its mechanisms. In fact, this is combined with low literacy. So when you don't have surplus, you don't know how to operate in market. Dominance of subsistence agriculture meant that there was no knowledge of market and its mechanisms. Third, there was a requirement of equitable distribution of resources. There was a requirement of equitable distribution of resources and prevent concentration of wealth. And prevent concentration of wealth. Next, there was a requirement of infrastructural development. Infrastructural development and industrial development industrial development and infrastructural development and industrial development with intention of balanced regional growth. Then next, to counter the different instances of market failure, under this you can write the first subpoint, public goods. Public goods, they are characterized by the features of non-rival and non-excludability. Features of non-rival consumption and non-exclusivity. These include national defense, roads, bridges, etc. Left to the market forces, these services will not be provided for. So hope you understand non-rival, non-excluder and how the free rider problem will be there. Because when you can't exclude anyone, you will always have some people who will not pay. So that is a free rider problem. And also when it is a non-rival consumption, you will have to price it for free because you will not reduce it for the other person. And zero price free riders you cannot provide it in the market. Next, in the market failure only. Externalities. In this you can write there are some costs and benefits in provision. There are costs and benefits in provision of certain goods and services. which cannot be taken into account by the market system. There are costs and benefits in provision of certain goods and services which cannot be taken into account by market system. Costs and benefits in provision of goods and services which cannot be taken into account by market system. For example, primary education, basic health facilities, drinking water and sanitation are positive externalities. Whereas drugs involve negative externalities, or drugs involve negative externalities. The market system cannot be relied upon to provide for these. The next is market control. Market control. Monopolies, under this only. Monopolies in provision of goods and services can provide dominant role in the market, which may lead to exploitation of consumer. Then another is strategic sectors. Market cannot be trusted in supply of services critical for maintaining sovereignty and integrity of the nation. Cannot be trusted in supply of services critical for maintaining sovereignty and integrity of the nation. In this you can write one more point. The tragedy of the commons. Can you explain what do you understand? Phrase से क्या समझ आ रहा है? हाँ? Tragedy of the commons. Either be you cannot trust the market. What do you understand by this? Tragedy of the commons. Related to environment. Common, which is common for all. Exactly. So when you are involving the market forces or private players in, say, using the natural resources, they will go on exploiting the resources more and more to get the profits. They'll create more and more pollution. They do not care about the environment because they care only about profits and production, getting the maximum profit. So the government needs to undertake the protection of environment. This is slightly, you can say, subset of your negative externality, that it has an impact on environment. But who is the owner of the Commons. What is the commons? Commons are your natural resources. Common ownership, which you can say. Air. These are commons. Water resources. These are commons. They do not belong to any specific person. Even natural calamities, hazards. So, market, if left to the market forces, there would be exploitation of the resources without taking into account the sustainability. So it is the state who needs to account for the sustainable use of the resources. This is the tragedy of commons. So when you leave it to private sector, again it will lead to water pollution, it will lead to air pollution. So you need state intervention. People will exploit common goods, and common goods are air, water, these natural resources. Yes. Green GDP. So that is in making your intense GDP more green, as in taking care of the environment. So, but tragedy of commons is who's, again, yes, slightly related to it itself, that you have to protect the environment as well. So tragedy of commons, I think it's clear. This is another case of market failure. वो पूरा कोल निकाल लेंगे. They do not think about of the future generations. You need state intervention for sustainable development. Air market cannot work. Then next point you can write. The ideological influence. The ideological influence. This you can write first. You can write down the what you can say, this influence of Fabian socialism on the national leadership. Influence of Fabian nationalism on national leadership. In fact, one of the other proponents, very big proponents of Fabian socialism was Menon, V.K. Krishna Menon also. National leadership was influenced by Fabian socialism and a general outrage against laissez-faire. You can write after one break that new paragraph, that planning in India was an, yes, B.K. Shankar Menon, yes. He was a Fabian socialist. Planning in India was indicative planning. Is indicative planning where the government strives to achieve. लोहिया जी, ये तो सारे सोशलिस्ट तो थे ही. अभी वाली लीडरशिप क्या है? Government strives to achieve objectives of planning through changes in its policies. Is indicative planning where government strives to achieve objectives of planning through changes in its policies and regulatory framework in economic activity. I hope meaning of indicative planning is clear. This was not centralized or planning by direction. Directive planning नहीं था ये. This was indicative only. One thing you can again write. Planning Commission was formed. Planning Commission was formed in 1950 or was constituted in 1950, for formalization of or operationalizing the planning system in India. The various functions of Planning Commission are: the various functions of Planning Commission are: first, make an assessment of the material, capital and human resources of the country. Make an assessment of the material, capital and human resources of the country. Assessment of material, capital and human resources of the country, and investigate the possibilities of augmenting these resources. Assessment of material, capital and human resources of the country, and investigate the possibilities of augmenting these resources. That are found to be deficient in relation to our nation's requirement. Human resources, and investigate the possibilities of augmenting these resources that are found to be deficient in relation to the nation's requirement. Formulate a plan for the effective and balanced utilization of country's resources. Now you are talking about लोहिया जी की perfume, and अभी when you will not write you will say dictate slow. And यहाँ पे you are talking about perfume, and अभी 2 minutes बाद you will say you are dictating fast. Second is formulate a plan for the effective and balanced utilization of country's resources. Third, on a determination of priorities, define the stages in which the plan should be carried out. Determination of priorities, define the stages in which the plan should be carried out, and propose the allocation of resources. Propose the allocation of resources for completion of each stage. Indicate factors. Next, indicate the factors which are tending to retard economic development. They are tending to retard economic development, and determine the conditions that should be established for execution of plan. Next, determine the nature of machinery necessary for successful implementation of the plan. Determine the nature of machinery for successful implementation of the plan. Next, appraisal from time to time. Of the progress achieved in the execution of appraisal from time to time of the progress achieved in the execution of the plan. And recommend adjustments. Last, make recommendations on the prevailing economic conditions policies, measures as may be referred to it for advice by central or state governments. See, 1950 we adopted this democratic planning. Two institutions, one institution, this primarily planning commission was instituted. Now see, read what all are its objectives. You will understand how central a role planning commission was playing in the Indian economy till 2014. 2014 was the year when it was abolished, and came in its place was Niti Aayog. So planning commission, this is the most important body. See, read all its plans. How resources will be, what is the plan? What exactly should be the plan? It is estimating your resources. It is formulation of a plan. Also, it is talking about the resources required for achieving it. Implementation machinery, appraisal, evaluation and monitoring. So you can see how central a role planning commission is playing. Effective utilization of resources, starting from your planning for the resource, that how much resources we have, you estimate the resource, you are formulating the plans, then what are the resources required, you are also providing resources required. That means you are giving the finance to the plan, कि कितने पैसे लगेंगे, and you are also paying it, these states for it. See, this was the major point of contention why planning commission was abolished in 2014, because this was the major point of contention, as states did not have much say. See, planning commission was a regulatory, was a body. Yes, break after this discussion of planning commission. This body is coordinating with different ministries and coordinating with states also. See, when you are formulating the plans, different state plans were integrated into this one plan. State plans को integrate करके एक ही plan बनता था. Budgets were different, but plan was one. Annual budget for the central government was different from the state budgets, but plan was one only. When you are saying resources required, if you remember, budget had a distinction of plan and non-plan expenditure. This distinction was recently removed. Planned expenditure was those plan में जो भी बातें थी उसके अलावा जितना पैसा आएगा, that was mentioned here in this budget. So this was a complete comprehensive process which the planning commission was doing, and planning commission was an extra constitutional body. It was not formed by a law. Statutory body नहीं थी, ना कि constitutional body थी. It was formed by a law. And one thing I forgot, ये सिर्फ indicative planning. This planning was not just 5 year, एक perspective plan भी बनता था 15 year का. This was longer with longer term goals. So planning commission was doing a lot of things, coordinating with different states, coordinating with the ministries on how to achieve these plan. Different changes it had to do on the how much money it is giving. See, major point of contention became this, that states did not have a say in how much resources were being given to them. So you understand, and now see what Niti Aayog is doing. जो ये distribution of resources for these planned schemes and development programs was given by planning commission are now being given by Ministry of Finance. See, planning commission की सबसे ज्यादा लड़ाई होती थी दो लोगों से, दो body से. One was your Ministry of Finance because money was routed from here, but planning commission was giving out money for the planned activities. Second was its finance commission. That was a very big friction between these three bodies. And planning commission, because it was being headed by the prime minister, most of the prime minister used to head it, तो सबसे ज़्यादा इसी की, you can say the status of planning commission was very much high. It became an overworked body, became slightly political body. We will talk about all its problems, but you see the centrality of functions. Why I have made you write all these 7 points? मैं लिख के वो paper पे भी देता, because I have needed you to appreciate what exactly this body was doing. And right now India has no long-term plan, long-term vision that what exactly do we want. Niti Aayog came out with a 3-year agenda. 3-year agenda वो 3 साल में निकल गया. Nobody knows what happened. It is coming out with a 20. One of the biggest problems with Niti Aayog today is it is only seeing the short-term goals of the political class today. It is so heavily controlled by the Prime Minister's office that it is seeing the nearby goals what it has to achieve. Planning Commission, no matter how flawed, it always had a 5-year plan and had backed up resources. It was estimating a lot. Planning Commission used to do a lot of studies on various economic topics. Last point is this only, that the present conditions, poverty figures, a lot of things. This was a proper think tank. But the thing why it became bloated was because of its political influence. Because when you are distributing resources, this becomes very contentious. Which states are getting what, how much you are distributing, how exactly it is being done, this becomes a point of problem, and that is why Planning Commission was becoming redundant, because it was not concerning with the state governments. सबसे बड़ी problem यही थी कि state governments की, the body which was involving the state government was the National Development Council. The National Development Council was the political body which included all the chief ministers of different states. See, Planning Commission in the first phase, before you can say 66, 67, the first 3 phases, planning was picture perfect. It performed a very good function. 67 के बाद से जब political instability हुई and Madam जी Prime Minister बनी, उसके बाद से this became very political and it started deteriorating. जब ये political influence बढ़ता गया Planning Commission में, there itself its downfall started. Then role changed after 91. Because 1991 you had LPG reforms. The role of the state was taken back. But major point of contention with Planning Commission was this distribution of finances, thereby having a friction with Ministry of Finance and Finance Commission, and also not listening to the states. Modi ji, Jayalalitha, सब लोग बहुत बोलते थे कि nobody listens to us in these NDC meetings. And you had to comply with what the money was coming, because state plans were integrated into this. State plans इन्हीं के हिसाब से चलते थे, and you had no say. And plus, when nobody is listening to you in the meetings, you had to accept the plans. That is why it became a point of contention. 2014, the first step he did was abolish this commission. But it had a very good things also. We will discuss evaluation in detail. Right now, I was just telling you about the points that it had resource distribution function also, which was very critical. It was also appraising the plan. ऐसा नहीं था कि change नहीं होता था plan में. It was also being done, but yes, with time it grew into a more bureaucratic body with a lot of political interference. In fact, one of the more proponents majorly जो head रहे planning commission के मोंटिक सिंह अहलूवालिया, उन्होंने अपनी book में लिखा कितनी बड़ी problem हो गई थी, that they were not doing good work. So this is your Planning Commission and the National Development Council. So we'll start with the first 5-year plan after this break of 5-10 minutes. NDC continue, but it can't take action as before. NDC अब है ही नहीं. अब there's Team India under Niti Aayog, which is combination of all prime minister of chief ministers. But there's nothing as such to do in Niti Aayog because it does not have any distribution powers, neither it has any plan to work on. Before we proceed with the 5-year plans, एक छोटा सा box में you can write the objectives of planning in India. What do you think would be the objectives? There's not much to discuss, but still, rationale of planning say you can talk about the objectives. What are the different objectives? Economic development. Economic development, that is your increasing living standard. Growth and development. Proper allocation of resources. That could be, but more broadly, economic development, it is modernization of the economy. This is not just changing the structure of the economy from shifting people from agriculture to industry to services, but also increasing the R&D, technological base, improving the technological base of the economy. What could be the other objectives? Employment. See, economic development, when you say development, will cover growth, employment, something else. Social justice. Formalize market system. You could say market system. Eradication of poverty, social justice, economic development, growth and development. Anything else? Very important function. Ecological development, technological modernization, poverty alleviation, social justice, social inclusion, social justice, self-reliance. See, this is different from self-sufficient. Self-reliance does not mean autarky. It doesn't mean self-sufficient. Self-reliance is we will try to have our own capabilities of producing, but doesn't mean we are close to outside world. This is often confused term. Even Atmanirbhar Bharat talks about self-reliance and not talk about self-sufficient. Self-sufficiency talks about that we will not be dependent on imports, we will be completely blocked up from outside. Self-reliance means that we will produce our own technologies, but we will be open to the world also. But majorly self-reliance. And you know what is the problem, what is the idea behind self-reliance? क्यों हमने self-reliance की objective था? 1947 self-reliance, past experience. Because of the bad things we had faced due to foreign investments and the company coming in and the looting of resources from our country. So self-reliance was coming from that. We will not be dependent on foreign companies, foreign technologies, foreign aids. That is why modernization was also one of the objectives. Improved living standard is economic development. Increasing the standard of living, economic development, employment, economic development, poverty, social justice. So these are the 4 broad objectives of social development. Now, with this 5-year plan, modernization, yes, modernization of various sectors. First 5-year plan. What was the objective? Or broadly, what do you think was being done here? Equitable distribution, ye to everything comes under development. What do you think was happening here? Problem kya thi for first 5-year plan ki? Then you will be able to know what exactly it was trying to do. Focus on agriculture. Why? Because you had food shortages. You had inflation because of shortage of various goods. Imbalances, strengthening production, vocal for local, yes, this is all self-reliance. Focus on established infrastructure for R&D, yes, everything is here. Now, ये black pen के लिए food shortages, inflation, also, there were 1947 partition, 51 to 56 is the first plan. There was also problem of providing to the access to resources to your refugees. So these were the major three problems with the first 5-year plan. Okay, this is what we need to provide for. Now in this context, what do you think would be the most focused thing in the first 5-year plan? Agriculture. What exactly in agriculture? Before agriculture, सबसे पहली प्रॉब्लम क्या थी हमारी प्लानिंग की? सबसे पहली प्रॉब्लम रिसोर्स. यस, व्हाट इज द प्रॉब्लम ऑफ रिसोर्स बिफोर एग्रीकल्चर? सबसे पहली प्रॉब्लम, व्हाट डिड द फर्स्ट पॉइंट वी हैड रिटन इन द rationale for planning? Yes, capital resources. We had to increase the savings rate. Increase the savings rate. And that is why land reforms. Yes, land reforms was one part of this. इसी time पे. Increase the savings rate in the economy, and that is why the first 5-year plan का inspiration came from the Harrod-Dormer model. Yes, agriculture, yes, but first primary motive of plan was to solve the economic problem of increasing the savings rate. And that is why the first 5-year plan was inspired by the Harrod-Dormer model. You don't have to go into the technical details of it. Harrod-Dormer model talked about the capital output ratio, that is your how much savings is required to generate 1 rupee of output. So the basic idea was to increase savings. Savings will lead to investment, and investment will lead to more output. So आपको अपना capital output ratio, national income growth is determined by the rate of savings by the capital output ratio. Less savings थी, yes, we wanted to increase the savings. In savings will lead to more investments, which will lead to increase in capital formation. This is what we wanted to do. Core, I think you would have done. What is core? ये incremental capital output ratio or capital output ratio have not done in GDP. I-core, what does it show? The intensity of capital. Investment required to raise the output. This is your ratio. यही core है. Incremental है क्योंकि because incremental comes with the time. What is difference between core and I-core? When you talk about incremental capital output ratio, you are talking about certain time limit. Incremental, when you say incremental over certain time. When you are saying core, this is general capital output ratio. So Harrod-Dormer model was concerned with increasing the savings of the economy, leading to increase in investments, leading to capital formation. This was the idea behind the first 5-year plan, because we were starting with first 5-year plan was 1951 to 56. See, it is not exactly efficiency of investment. You cannot say efficiency of investment because, see, for a steel plant, your I-core value will be very high. Do you agree? But do you think it is efficiency? कोई भी steel plant लगाएगा उस time पे we will be seeing high I-core. So it is not necessarily efficiency of investment. It is just showing your intensity of investment. बहुत बार we get confused with this, that this shows the efficiency. That how efficient you are, because अगर आपको कम investment लग रही है, that means you already have a good base. But if you are working on heavy industries which require a lot of input, do you think when high I-core will show poor efficiency of using of output, using of investments? So I-core basically is an indicator of intensity of investment. It's not necessarily an indicator of efficiency. Not necessarily, because I-core will always, for a bigger plant, will always be high. But that doesn't mean you are wasting resources. This is a general misconception we have. It is productivity of capital. It is not productivity, it is intensity of capital. Marker ही नहीं चल रहा. So this is increasing the savings rate, which will increase the investments, which will lead to more capital formation. This was the first idea of the first 5-year plan, that we need to increase the saving rates from 5-6% to 20-25%. Yes, investment between investment made and the, so savings is what will translate into investment, and this will be lead to output, and we had to increase the savings rate. That is why this score comes into picture, the capital output ratio. The second thing, this is the first, that you need to increase your capital, you need to increase your savings. That is why influenced by Harrod-Domer. The second thing was, as you mentioned, infrastructure. Oh, sorry, in agriculture. What exactly in agriculture? Food crops. What was the focus of the plan? Food crops कैसे बढ़ेंगी? By increasing the productivity. How will you increase the productivity? While doing green revolution, I have told you already. What is this? What exactly was the investment? Capital investments in the form of this is why, what did they say? Modern temples, irrigation dams, creating of irrigation infrastructure. 3 projects started at this time. Can anyone tell me what were the different 3 projects? Yes, output, increase in productivity, how? Irrigation canals, which were the 3 different projects? तो बहुत famous हैं. Yes, these are very famous projects which were started. एक तो यहीं से कभी भी पहाड़ों पे जाओ सबसे पहले आता है, चंडीगढ़ से निकलते ही आता है. Yes, भाखड़ा नंगल. There were 3 major projects started. Damodar Valley, very good. Third, Bhakra Nangal, Damodar Valley Corporation, very good. Third, Hira Gananits, Hirakud, DVC, yes. Then what exactly, apart from irrigation, you had institutional reforms. What were those? This we have already discussed in detail. Yes, these were the 3. Institutional reforms. Land reforms. Also agriculture improvement by other infrastructure creation. This was one of the most important. This we should write different. Isme better farming techniques was also one of the another major. Yes, Hirakud, everyone inside Hirakud. What is the other major of point of focus of the first 5-year plan? Industry. Are you sure? Industry पूरा पढ़ लिया. First 5-year plan ने क्या बात की थी? 1948 की IPR से क्या ही हुआ था? 1951 came the licensing system, industrial development regulation. Industry majorly comes from the second 5-year plan. Mahalanobis will come and overtake the, yes, tenancy and all. Land reforms, yes. This is the major component of the, this will start from the first and will continue till the end. Majorly, electricity आज तक भी नहीं पहुंची है सब जगह. So you could say वो उस टाइम पे क्या हाल था. Installed capacity, I had given you figures on this also. Installed capacity at 1950-51 was how much? 2300 megawatt. This is what turned into 1,04,000 megawatt in 1991, and today we are approximately 3,65,000 megawatt. This we have already discussed this in agriculture or industry. Nehru Mahalanobis will come second. First is up criteria dekho, food shortages, inflation, refugees. The problem to be solved is this. Industry will come later. Until and unless you solve the problem of food shortages, you will not talk about industry. This is the problem you had to tackle. So first is you have to improve the savings. For anything you have to have savings. Until and unless you have savings, you will not have investment, you will not have capital formation. That is why Harrod-Domer model became the influence for this plan. Increase self-sufficiency, yes. Agriculture became the most important thing because we needed to increase production. Abhi bhi productivity would not be the right word to use here because we still had poor production. हमें तो पहले production का सोचना था कि कैसे food grains में self-sufficiency आए. So that is why irrigation infrastructure, institutional reforms, land reforms, better farming techniques yet on a smaller scale, but major was this. Why is Nehru said as the father of modern India or maker of modern India? Temples of modern India, because he started with creation of these big things, irrigation infrastructure. In fact, if you see, this is the only time when you will see the talk about irrigation infrastructure. You already know agriculture started talking about MSP after 65. It stopped about institutional reforms, land reforms, sab band. So this is the only time when you are talking about certain infrastructure in agriculture. 5 IITs were set up in the country. 5 IITs with the help of foreign aid. We'll also discuss financing of planning reforms. First 5-year plans in the initial years till 65 was financed by a lot of foreign aid, foreign help. और in fact foreign help की हमें problem समझ आएगी जब पाकिस्तान war के बाद foreign help सारी बंद हो गई थी. Because the allies, they were favoring Pakistan, not India. Even 71 में इंडिया का एक ही दोस्त था रशिया. पाकिस्तान का support was done by US. Education reform. This is why Nehru is criticized. This is the only reason Nehru is criticized. He created big things. He created irrigation infrastructure. He created a lot amount of big IITs, NITs, but he never talked about primary healthcare, primary education. ये उन्होंने neglect कर दिया. ये एक criticism है, which according to me is not a valid criticism because state was responsible for that. State governments. If we would have started with primary education and primary healthcare, yes, he would have achieved certain success, but then these things would be left out. Doing both things would at the same time would not have been feasible. Because you see, we are starting with a very small amount of resources. हमारे पास अपना पैसा नहीं है. So this is the most feasible option he had. And yet he is criticized. So you can always mention, just to tell you, कहीं पे question आएगा नहीं, he never focused on primary education. जबकि literacy rate was just 16%. His focus was on creating big institutes, IITs, NITs, irrigation infrastructure, a lot of big infrastructure, but not on small. Now the targeted growth rate of the first 5-year plan, anyone knows how much it was? Targeted growth rate. Average for the first 5 years. 2.1%. This was your targeted growth rate. And you know how much we achieved? Not focused on primary education, yes. पहले पेट भर जाए तो education पर ध्यान दे. See, that you can judge. He did a lot of things, so you always have a lot of factors to judge people on. Especially Jawaharlal Nehru. He's one of the greatest leaders India has seen. Yes, 3.6. Targeted 2.1, achieved 3.6. See, these figures are important because you can get statements like, for the first time we achieved what was targeted in the 3rd year plan, 4th year plan, 5-year plan. So you should know even the 1st year plan you had achieved. Exact numbers nahi aayenge, but direction always you should know. So you should know if plan was a failure or a success. A lot of time there are confusions ke 4th 5-year plan, 5th 5-year plan inme aaya tha. Hindu growth rate to is 70s. But the first 5-year plan itself outreached its target. 2.1 was per annum was average targeted in the 5 years. 3.6 was the achieved. Now what exactly was the reason for this? कैसे हुआ ये? इतना आउटबर्स्ट कैसे आया? यहीं पे इन फीचर से ही आएगा. Come on, हाँ? State dominance of what? Who was investing in agriculture? Who was investing in infrastructure? Yes. So this is what was giving you growth. First, primary important, you had a very good growth in infrastructure. Road and power upwards of 7%. This was very, very significant. Yeah, you can in free time read about Nehru and compare it with the other prime ministers. Yes, you should definitely do that and you'll realize how big a leader he was. Infrastructure growth. This was very significant. Transportation and electricity grew more than 7% per annum. Very high investments by government in transportation and energy. Grew more than 7% per annum. 7% plus growth per annum. Because of low base, very good. One of the reasons for this was because of low base. Growth of what? GDP growth rate. GDP. This 2.1 and 3.6 are GDP growth rates. One was your infrastructure growth, then you had a steady agriculture growth also. Around 3% per annum. Now you know when you have a good, especially in the last 2 years, 40, 54, 55, 56, in years में तो अच्छी production थी. Effective and balanced utilization of resources is a very broad term. You could be more specific at how we could overpower. We had a steady agricultural growth. Now you know what exactly does, if agricultural growth is good, then what happens? How is agriculture related to the broader economy? Rising incomes in agriculture? Yes. You will have demand for industrial goods and services and also you are provider of raw material. So this automatically has an impact on overall GDP. Consumer goods, agriculture inputs, both things are coming up. One of the answers given here is low base effect. A very good answer. What do you mean by this? Yes, surplus will lead to rural demand increasing, which will increase the rural standard, investment in other demand for goods and services. Yes, this we have done in detail. Low base effect, what do you mean by this? ये बहुत important है. कई बार हमारा, why do you think growth is so much high this time? जो अभी growth figures आ रहे हैं इतने ज्यादा क्यों आ रहे हैं? Yes, because when you are comparing, if you have a year say 2010, इसमें you have a low growth, then automatically 2011 में whatever growth you will have will show a good one because you had a low base. And when you are starting at 1947, you already had a very poor base. GDP growth rate was approximately 0.5% per annum. This is 1900 to 1947. You had a low base. Over a low base, always your growth will be good. Percentage growth will be good. Growth over starting from very, with respect to base year, yes, initial numbers are low, point of measure is low. Any other factor which you think is reason for good growth in this years, achieved so much? Similar after COVID-19, yes, COVID-19 में आपका इसलिए when you choose your base year, you have to be very careful. Base year is always chosen which does not have extremities. अभी भी if you want to see the growth of different states, you will see Bihar has very high growth rates because उसका base हमेशा poor है, because it is getting on a very small base. That is why it will show growth of 8%, 10%. But if you see in nominal figures how small it is as compared to other states. Because other states have already produced high, तो उनका growth ज़्यादा नहीं होगा. A lot of time you should know what the base year is. बहुत बार female literacy, female employment में these are the reasons के जो base year है आपका वहाँ पे abnormality थी. That is why base year is chosen as a stable year where you did not have extremities. You always choose a base year which has a normal trend. Any other reason which you could think of? भारत आजाद हुआ है, थोड़ा बहुत पैसे लोगों को आए हैं. They're free from British rule. See, there was a rise in pent-up demand. Similar related to COVID. And now you are going out. You are buying clothes. You had a lot of pent-up demand during that time, during the British era. So the regulation of market, national movement, low income, everything, these factors are now opening up. People are now getting the confidence. They are buying. They are selling. So these things have opened up. there was a rise in pent-up demand which was much constrained by the British rule. This is what is your first 5-year plan. See, first 5-year plan was, you can say, did not have detailed lines of action. It was more of an intention that what exactly we want to do and how we are trying to do. And mostly, you see, planning commission did not had any, you could say, opposition from the state governments. See, when planning commission is all ruled by the central government, why do you think state governments did not come up against this central body? One party, yes, this was when planning commission, see, in the initial years, planning commission has to build its trust. Any body which is doing such an important function has to build its trust. So it needs backing. Why was this supported by all the state and the central governments? In fact, 15 saal mein planning commission built a lot of trust, and since Nehru talked about planning being a technological exercise, he filled it up with people with backing of technology. Mahalanobis was a statistician and not an economist. So he built it up with a lot of experts, technological experts there, because in the initial days, if you do not back your body, you will not have trust and you cannot perform this critical function. So why did planning commission did not see any, yes, like after depression, yes. Why did planning commission did not see any, you can say, opposition from the state governments? Yes, one, you are correct, planning commission, because one is your same party in center and state. 67 tak koi nahi tha. It was the same party, Congress. Any other? Exactly. States did not have much resources. State governments development kaise karengi? State government did not have a very good tax base. Also, state governments did not have very good leaders, you could say, who could oppose or who could build up the intellectual opposition to Nehru. आपके पास technocrats भी नहीं थे state में. Right now, if you see, who's the finance minister of Tamil Nadu? No opposition. No opposition के अलावा भी reasons थे. One party in power, also resources were lagging with the states. States did not have much of the leaders. Why did we have governor system? ये हमें stabilize करना था state government में, क्योंकि state governments में हमारे पास leaders नहीं थे. Politics in the states were nascent. So that is why you needed central control, because most of your leaders were in the union government at the central stage who were participants in the national movement. State governments के पास leaders नहीं थे. Governor इसीलिए एक point of contact बहुत जरूरी था, because state leadership was very weak. State political leadership was weak in most of the states. अगर उस टाइम मोदी जी होते तो. Okay, so this is your first 5-year plan, and this is the reason why there was no initial opposition to planning commission, because planning commission, एक तो similar party, also state governments did not have the resources or the intellectual backing to counter this huge. And planning commission had a lot of experts. Yes, charismatic, nationalistic, and intellectual politicians still are less. That is not the point. But it was manned by a lot of experts. So this is your first 5-year plan. And it was very much less detailed, because right now you are just testing the waters. So major things focused here. Now, what were the major allocations given to in the first 5-year plan? This is also important, because बहुत बार confusion होता है that industries got it, agriculture got it, or who got it. In the first 5-year plan, the major allocation went to which? त्यागराजन, तमिलनाडु. Yes, finance minister त्यागराजन की degrees देखो कितनी है. PTR, Dr. PTR, he is an expert in economics. You just see his views. GST council में भी या brashing दी थी. So, what was the allocation? Guess. Allocation सबसे ज़्यादा किसको मिले होंगे? Agriculture, no. ये लो agriculture की placing कर देते हैं. Agriculture is here. What is infrastructure? Be more specific. Irrigation is here. Huh? Energy. This is the order. 26.4% went to transport and Tamil Nadu has made a committee consisting of great economists. So right now states have a lot of resources. State के अपने resources बहुत हो गए हैं, state के पास intellectual capacity भी बहुत है. In fact, few years back ये जो IMF की head है गीता गोपीनाथ, she was working with the Kerala government. So the states do a lot of things. अभी recently पंजाब के resources पे Monting Singh Ahluwalia had a report. So state are now independently dealing with these experts. At the time of independence, in the initial years, state did not have these resources. They did not have the intellectual capacity also to get these experts. Center had, because center में बहुत पढ़े लिखे लोग थे. ये खुद भी leaders बहुत जगह पढ़े हुए थे. आधे ज्यादा leaders Cambridge, LSE बहुत ज्यादा जगह से पढ़ के आए थे. That is why Fabian socialism का वहीं से approach आया, because Fabian socialism had a lot of influence there. That is why these leaders came trained. The political ideology was very strong. It was not like के हाँ बता दिया कि rightist है या leftist जाना. They were themselves influenced by it. Starting from Dadabhai Naoroji to Annie Besant to V.K. Krishna Menon, B.K. Nehru, Nehru's cousin. He was also very influenced by this Fabian socialism. A lot of leaders. Ambedkar was so well read. Yes, transport and communication was the highest allocation. 26.4%. Industry was one of the lowest. Industry को बहुत कम था. Industry was very low. The top three are this. The first is transport, then irrigation, and agriculture and allied. Transport and communication. Industry was very low. Second 5-year plan. This is allocation of the money, resources to which of the fields. Now what do you think are the features here? IPR 1956 हमने पढ़ी है. IPR 1956 was what flowed from this. Influenced by P.C. Mahalanobis. And the most interesting thing is he was not an economist. He was a statistician, जो भी बोलते हैं से, stats person. Indian Institute of ISIJ, Indian Stats Institute, ISI, was started by him. Sample survey techniques was started by him. A great stats person. In fact, all of our census techniques and everything, why we had such good data collection system, was due to this man. But in fact, most of the people know him for second 5-year plan and failure of the plan. See, there's not much to dictate. These are just factors you can write down, small things. I will dictate the complete stages if you want. The first stage was 1951 to 66, then 66 to 80, 80 to 90, 91 onwards. But major features you can note down. What do you think were the features? Yes, Mahalanobis. The first thing, public sector as commanding heights of the economy. There was a very famous debate during this time, the Mahalanobis Vakil debate. C.N. Vakil was another famous economist. He wanted to focus on basic industries. That we have a good agriculture base, basic industries would provide the inputs, and we can do that. We can improve the industries, but what he wanted was focus on heavy and key industries. Key industries, I already told you, are infrastructure. He wanted heavy capital goods. He said directly develop the basic industries. Mahalanobis said we should develop these heavy industries and key industries. This will lead to trickle down all over the economy. The focus on heavy industries, capital good industry will create such an industrial base. Focus on industry, graduate from Cambridge, colleague of Ramanujan, yes. But he was a stats, he never studied economics. Economics खुद पढ़ी थी उन्होंने. Heavy industries and key industries, because he wanted to create an industrial base of capital goods. One important feature here was, and see, these heavy industries and key industries would to be provided by the public sector, because they are highly capital intensive. These industries are highly capital intensive. This will be provided by the public sector. What he said was consumer goods which are required for the basic consumers will be provided by labor intensive private sector. बल्कि ये हुआ नहीं ज्यादा कि प्राइवेट सेक्टर will provide the mass consumer goods employing a lot of labor. We will burn the capital in these industries. बस प्रॉब्लम ये थी कि कैपिटल बर्न करेंगे बट पैसा लाएंगे कहां से? इट वॉज ऑल ऑन बोरोइंग्स, इट वॉज ऑल ऑन एड. दिस इज वाई द प्रॉब्लम स्टार्टेड बिकॉज यू वर डूइंग कैपिटल इंटेंसिव. हमारा कोई भी कैपिटल इंटेंसिव, वी डिड नॉट हैव द बेस फॉर कैपिटल. इन द फर्स्ट 5-year plan वी हैव सीन दैट वी वर ट्राइंग टू बिल्ड द level of savings to have certain investments. But he talked about capital intensive, heavy industries, key industries, public sector करेंगे. We will build a base of a capital goods which will provide multiplier effect on the economy and create industry wide growth. Consumer goods जो mass consumer goods लोगों को चाहिए वो labor intensive private sector provide कर देगा. They will employ the labor. This is what the Mahalanobis strategy talked about. This became a very big failure because we burnt a lot of capital here which was not ours, and also we could not develop a lot of heavy industries. One of the important point of Mahalanobis strategy or the Mahalanobis plan was that it will be an import substitution strategy. We will remove all the imports. We will build the industries ourselves from scratch. Produce commodities which are otherwise imported in the country. This is important. This is the statement directly asked in prelims, that the second 5-year plan focused on substituting basic and capital goods. अब problem ये थी उस statement की कि उन्होंने substituting लिख दिया. उन्होंने ये नहीं लिखा import substitution. They just mentioned substituting, and if you see the plan talks about substitution itself. It never said, it did not mention import. वो context import की बात कर रहा था. In the one of the lines it said we will substitute basic and capital goods. Context of the whole paragraph was import substitution. UPSC picked up that one line and asked it in the prelims that it is focusing on substitution of capital and basic goods, and this became a confusion. This substitution means import substitution or substitution of other goods with capital goods, that we will not focus on consumer but focus on capital. This became a confusion कि substitution consumer का capital से हो रहा है या import substitution हो रहा है इन दोनों का, and it was import substitution. Now why do you think we did? Why do you think they did this? What was the purpose? What was the purpose behind import substitution strategy? Yes, to maintain our balance of payment. We had to control our foreign exchange outflow because we were importing a lot of things. और problem ये हुई कि if you remember industrial development के second phase में, in the first phase when we were saying industrial growth, I gave you a point that there was an issue that we were spending a lot because you had necessary imports. See, import substitution तो कर रहे हो. This is you will achieve in the longer run. But the point of contention became to make these heavy goods also you needed certain intermediate goods. You needed certain necessary imports. For that you needed forex. Okay, what else do you think was the problem? And this created a problem. Necessary imports, 1957-58 में we had a BOP crisis. But this is different. Right now just tell me what are the purpose of import substitution. Here itself we'll discuss problems of import substitution and objective of import substitution. Upliftment of import, how? Import, how you are uplifting when you are substituting for heavy industries. आप पहले heavy industries सारी बाहर से मंगाते थे. Now you will make it here. You are substituting for the imports. Create employment, very good. Because when you are creating these big and heavy industry and employment and these machine making industries, the producer goods, you will create a lot of employment. Also, what do you think would be the purpose? हमारी इंडस्ट्री क्या बना रही थी 47 में? Just the consumer goods. Now you are trying to create these capital goods also. That means you Increasing diversification. No, how are you? No, a lot of you are mentioning small sector protection. How will import substitution provide small sector protection? How is it a policy for small sector protection? Import substitution strategy is that we will make these heavy goods here, we will make the capital goods here, we will make the machine making goods, heavy engineering, everything here. Strengthening our local employment, yes. Diversification will increase. Again, self-reliance. Self-reliance. Yes, exactly. Aim was to make India self-reliant and self-generating. See, these were the major three features of the Mahalanobis plan. Public sector has commanding heights. What do you mean by commanding heights? This we have already discussed. What do you mean by commanding heights? Major control, command, height, major control of the economy in the hands of public sector. In fact, I think this is also they have asked in prelims once. Commanding heights kya hai? Heavy industries and key industries. Key industries is their infrastructure will be built by the private sector, mass consumer good by the labor intensive private sector. Import substitution strategy, you will build the capital goods here itself. The heavy goods, capital goods here itself. The purpose is maintain this. Now, what became the issues with this? Issues with the import substitution strategy. यहीं पे खत्म कर लेते हैं इसको. What do you think are the issues with this strategy? What do you think are the issues? Biggest issue that you are favoring a capital intensive industrialization when your advantage is labor intensive. Without capital, foregoing your competitive advantage, that is labor intensive growth. See, what he believed was कि if we are able to do this, इसके widespread impact बहुत होंगे. हमारी small scale और every industry maybe will grow because capital goods की बिल्कुल हम यहीं पे बना ही देंगे. Capital ही नहीं था. Stringent statement, lack of capital, no skill, lack of technology. Another point was you did not have no resources for R&D. आपके पास technology नहीं थी. If you remember, I told you how industrialization, if technological intensity in the first stage, you will have to provide protection to your competitive advantage sectors, such as textile, so what we start because they are low skill sectors and demand is ready-made. You provide them protection so that they can grow. In the second phase, you try to increase the technological intensity of that sector. Because next term development will come from technology. And how do you do that? You involve foreign players. You bring in foreign experts. You bring in foreign trade agreements, foreign technology agreements. The third step is you build the technology itself in your country. Now India is trying to do just the first thing. It has provided protection to PSUs, but it does not have any resource for research and development and technology. Serious shortfalls in production of jute sugar. ये तो होगा ही. जब आप कैपिटल गुड में ही सारा कुछ लगा लोगे, आपके पास कंज्यूमर गुड के बहुत शॉर्टफॉल होंगे. बिकॉज एवरीथिंग, इफ यू रिमेंबर, वी डिड दिस इन द industrial development phases, where I showed you capital development was growing in 13%, 19% range. Capital good was growing in the range of 2%, 3%, because you had invested all your resources in this. Another problem here was that you were not getting the low cost imports. आपको domestic quality से ही काम चलाना पड़ रहा था, and this was raising your cost. If you remember, even if we are doing imports, we were doing only of the necessities. The other low cost imports which are needed for production, we were not doing it. And this was not available, not allowed. This led to rise in cost. आप सिर्फ उन्हीं की इंपोर्ट्स कर रहे थे जो नेसेसिटीज थी. You were not getting the low cost imports, they were not available, and this led to a rapid rise in cost for production. Another problem which you can point out is, see, public sector was the one who were doing heavy industry. So when you have protectionist policies for public sector, what do you think is the problem? Yes. You had poor efficiency. You were producing poor quality, high cost products. The moment you avoid competition, you will get poor quality. जबकि दिया इसलिए था कि हम प्रोडक्टिविटी मतलब हम वी प्रोटेक्ट देम फ्रॉम आउटसाइड वर्ल्ड एंड लेट देम डेवलप देयर कैपेसिटी, बट इट नेवर हैपेंड. वी जस्ट गॉट पुअर प्रोडक्टिविटी, लो एफिशिएंसी, or you can say low quality product because of lack of competition. These are the costs of your import substitution strategy. But import substitution strategy is a very important component of the Mahalanobis plan. It's called Nehru-Mahalanobis plan because Nehru saw the vision. He did not know how to do it. ये models बना के Mahalanobis जी लेके आए. See, to them, every problem was a technical problem. And on paper they could solve it. This whole idea, Nehru idea of planning was that it is a technological process, technical process. You need experts. Mahalanobis, an expert in stats, a good knowledge of economics. He implemented with these models. Nehru saw the vision that I need heavy industries, and that is why it is called Mahalanobis model or the Nehru-Mahalanobis model. Other features you can mention is the licensing regime, is the features of this 5-year plan. There was licensing introduced, and also there were reserving of industries. Other component of second 5-year plan. But major are these three features. Public sector as the commanding heights, investments by public sector in the heavy industry and the key industry. Private sector will provide the mass consumption goods, employing labor intensive technologies. This is what he said, that labor intensive technologies will be used by them for producing the mass consumption goods. The mass consumption goods we had written, private sector will provide, that will be provided by labor intensive technologies. जो कैपिटल इंटेंसिव टेक्नोलॉजीज हैं वो हम लगाएंगे, वो पब्लिक सेक्टर लगाएगा. एंड दिस फेलियर. अनदर functions of second 5-year plan. Second 5-year plan is 56 to 61. Is your licensing regime to control the efficient use of resources. We've already mentioned the objectives of licensing, and also reserving sectors for public sector. What do you think was the targeted growth? See, IPR 1956 is what is second 5-year plan. That became, and IPR 56 यही Mahalanobis model ही चलेगा बहुत लंबे टाइम तक till 91. This is what was the driving. This we've discussed in industrial development. Okay, Mahalanobis strategy, this second 5-year plan 1956 will continue to work with slight changes in 1980, and that is why we had the recovery. What do you think was the targeted growth? Targeted growth. आइडिया पिछली बार हमारा क्या था? 3.21, 2.1, 3.6. नाउ अब तो हम 3.6 से थोड़ा ज्यादा ही सोचेंगे. above 5 अभी नहीं जा रहे. Targeted was 4.5. What we achieved was 4.2. Targeted 4.5, achieved 4.2. Now allocations, what do you think was the highest? ये आएगा क्वेश्चन प्रीलिम्स में, मतलब ऐसे डिफिकल्ट क्वेश्चंस आते हैं बना के. व्हाट डू यू थिंक वाज द हाईएस्ट? यही एक प्रॉब्लम है, हैवी इंडस्ट्री नहीं था. इंडस्ट्री वाज इंक्रीज्ड बट इट वाज नॉट द हाईएस्ट. स्टिल गेस व्हाट इज द हाईएस्ट? Highest allocation again to infrastructure, transport and communication. These type of statements are for prelims. That allocation to the second 5-year plan was what? Industry and minerals is second. Then was your irrigation and power. Irrigation and power इकट्ठे ही लिखे थे first second 5-year plans में. Then was agriculture. You don't need to know the percentages. I don't think that's important. You just need to know the allocations highest किसको थे. Transport and communication were the highest allocations. Infrastructure, yes, you're right, transport. Second was industry. (4.5 to 4.2). Can we discuss third also? Huh? It's already 8. Okay, next class. We'll complete the features of all 5-year plans. In the first half an hour, 45 minutes, we'll complete the 7 5-year plans. That is very basic, छोटी-छोटी चीजें ही हुई थी. Then the major thing to cover is the LPG reforms. How did we liberalize? The trade policy, the privatization, disinvestment debate, globalization, we'll all talk about that tomorrow. Then the 9th 5-year, 10th, 11th, 12th, they are very basic. नहीं कर रहे और. Thank you. If you have any doubts, you can let me know. इसके handouts, I don't think, we'll see. Let's cover it first, all the features, then we'll see if handouts are necessary. फीचर्स के हैंड आउट बन सकते हैं, बट लेट्स सी. अरे मैच आज ये तो पहले ही बता दे यार, आज तो 7:30 छोड़ देता है, तो मैच भी है सेमीफाइनल, पाकिस्तान एंड ऑस्ट्रेलिया.